Hello everyone and welcome to Everyday JavaScript. In this video we are going to continue our series JavaScript the hard part. We are going to continue with part 2 of this series where we are going to cover thread of execution and functions. I think it's one of the most basic videos where you'll learn how JavaScript code executes under the hood. After this video you'll know why JavaScript is a single threaded language and how it works under the hood when it encounters a line of code. And you'll also learn how functions work inside JavaScript. It's very simple, it's very basic, but there is a lot to learn over here. So if you don't know, we have a channel named Everyday JavaScript. If you have not yet subscribed to it, just go ahead and click that subscribe button. If you see it red, make it gray, and you can subscribe it, share it. And if you want any content that you want to be posted, or if you want any topic to be covered in our channel, just go ahead and mention it in our comments section and we'll try to cover it up. So let's get started. JavaScript, it's not at all fancy. It's a single threaded language. Everyone knows that. Single threaded means it can do one thing at a time. That means it's pretty basic. Simple things, it can do only one thing at a time. So basically JavaScript does only two things while execution. First thing is to go through the code line by line. First thing is known as execution of the code. It goes through the code line by line and it executes the code. That's it. That is known as the thread of execution. So if you provide a code, let's say it's of 10 lines, what it will do is encounter line 1, is it executable? Go ahead and execute it. Encounter line 2, is it executable? Go ahead and execute it. That's how it works. That's known as the series of series of going line by line and doing the code. That means that you get one task, do that task, get another task, do that task, get one more line, execute that line, is known as execution, or it's also known as thread of execution. Second thing it does while executing the code is whenever it encounters a variable, or let's say a constant or let, or let's say a function definition, right? You define a function and then later on you can use it. You define a variable and later on you can reference to that variable. It saves them. As soon as it encounters a name which is not a keyword, it considers it as a variable or as a identifier, another fancy term that I wanted to say, identifier, and it saves them in the memory. So only two things. Basically while executing the code, basically while running the code, it's like execution and saving. That's it. So let's take a simple example. Over here we'll switch to our drawing board and we'll take a simple example. So I'll just show you the example first. It's a simple program where we declare a constant num and assign it the value 3. We declare a function multiply by 2 and pass it a parameter input number. The multiply by 2 function does only have 2 lines, like it executes only 2 lines. It again declares another variable named result, which stores the value input times 2 and returns the result back. The next two lines, line number 7 and line number 8, are basically declaring two new variables or two new constants which contain the value which is evaluated from execution of function multiply by 2 by passing in various arguments. So I'll tell you the terms why I've used parameter at a different place and why I've used arguments at different place. What do you mean by function execution and what do you mean by function definition over here? So let's get started on our drawing board. I'll switch to our drawing board. So basically, over here we can see that we have I'll just increase the size of the code. So basically over here we can see that we have a function, so we have a line of code, 8 lines of code basically which JavaScript needs to execute. it goes through them series by series, one by one, and executes them. So let's start. So let's start with the first line. So basically JavaScript has thread of execution. So thread of execution and a place to save something. So basically it will be known as, I'll let you know the exact term. I've divided the portion where JavaScript code gets executed. So the fancy term, let's encounter the first line, const num equal to 3. Now when the JavaScript is encountering this line, that means that it says that I have to save something inside my memory which has a label num and assign it a value 3. So basically JavaScript, as we know, has a memory. JavaScript code execution does need memory. Now inside this memory, what it does is it creates a label or an identifier whose name is num and assigns it a value 3. Now next line that it encounters over here, remember it's a function definition. Does it execute the code? Anyone? No, it does not execute any code. It's just, again, let's say if you define a function multiply, then what happens is it treats this, the name of a function, as an identifier. So that means that it saves again the function definition in the memory. So let's save the function definition in the memory. num3. I'll go ahead and save multiply by 2. It's a function. It's a string of characters which will be saved inside my code. So I'll just save it simply by indicating it like this. It's a function. It's a string of code which will be at later point of time, whenever invoked or executed, will be called and will be ran. Now how do you know that this is a function definition? How does JavaScript know that it's a function definition? As soon as JavaScript encounters two things, like let's say a function keyword, and there's something, the name over here, and whatever you want to do, whatever the arguments, whatever the parameters that you want to pass, and the curly braces. As soon as JavaScript detects that these two are the curly braces, there's some code between the curly braces, it says that it's a function definition that is associated with this identifier. And this turns out to be a function definition. We'll see what is a function. We'll see what is a function execution. How will JavaScript know that it's a function execution? Yeah. So let's continue. Now the next line that we encounter over here is line number 7, that is constant output. Again, it's an identifier that is being declared in the memory of JavaScript. But here's the difference. Will output be assigned anything? Output is equal to a function execution of multiply by 2, and we are passing num to it. So we are passing an argument to a function execution. Now second thing, how does JavaScript know that it's a function execution? Simple. An identifier followed by round parentheses. This is known as function execution. So basically now we are about to execute another piece of code which is already stored in our memory. If you remember, it's stored over here, right? We have stored it in multiply by 2 identifier in our memory. So we are going to store it, we are going to execute that line of code and we are going to run that code. So let's go ahead and run this code. Now this is our thread of execution. This left side, which I didn't indicate before, is our thread of execution. Oops, sorry. Just a second. How do we turn this layer back again? Doing good job with our blackboard, new blackboard. Yeah, so this on the left hand side that you see is known as thread of execution. And I'll choose some different color to indicate this thing. This entire thing that you see over here, the combination of thread of execution and memory is known as execution context. So basically I'm executing some piece of code on the left hand side. Basically I'm executing some piece of code line by line on the left hand side in context of some memory. That is known as execution context. A combination of execution of code with respect to some variables that are stored in my memory at that point of time is known as execution context. So basically now our turn, we were at line number 7. Yeah, line number 7 is basically output equal to multiply by 2 and it has num over here basically. Now what does num reference to? Let's say JavaScript does not know what num is, so it will start searching it inside the memory. Right, we are passing in num over here on the line number 7. So it was num that is being passed to this JavaScript call execution of a function. So it will search in the memory whether num exists or not, and yes, it is existing. Surprisingly, there is a label named num which is having a value assigned to it, which is 3. So basically we are having we are having execution of function multiply by 2 being assigned to output variable now. But multiply by 2 is again a string of characters, right? It's a string of characters which is stored in our memory, which it needs to be executed. Now a function itself is a mini program, right? A function itself is a mini program over here, and that means that that mini program has its own thread of execution, has its own execution context, has its own memory. That means that JavaScript will now switch from here, switch from this main thread of execution into a new thread of execution that we are going to draw. Let's draw it So JavaScript will create its own new thread of execution for this function, which will have its own memory, albeit it's also known as local memory, right? Because it's specific to this function. It will be specific to this function's execution. Also, we'll have something that is its own thread of execution. So we'll write over here in short, thread of execution. So what is the first thing that will JavaScript do over here? So if you are thinking that it will go ahead and save result inside the memory, I think we are wrong. It will see if it has any parameters, right? First thing, before jumping into the body of the function, it will go and look if the function has any parameters. Do we have any parameters? Yes, we have input number over here. So what JavaScript will do is it will go ahead and save input parameter. And what will input parameter evaluate to? The thing that we have passed over here, 3. Yes. What's the second thing JavaScript will do? It's declaring a constant name result and assigning it value of input number times 2. So it would be similar to what we have seen, a label or a identifier being created named result, and it will assign 3 into 2, that is 6. Yes. Now comes the interesting part. We get a return statement. So it's a thread of execution. It's a statement in thread of execution I'll write. So we get return statement over here. What does this do? Return statement, that means return means go back to your original thread of execution. Go back to to the place where you came inside. So over here we are going to look at, we are again going to go back to, we are going to go out of this inner thread of execution and we are going to return back to the main thread of execution. Okay, so for the inner function, for the function multiply by 2, this also became an execution context. The combination of thread of execution and local memory for multiply by 2 became its execution context, because this function was executed in context of where input number was 3 and your result became 6. So basically it was executed in context of this particular memory. It was executed in context of this particular thing. How shall I draw it? Here, this particular memory, right? This code was executed line by line in context of this memory, local memory. Now we've encountered return statement. We are again coming back to the point, line number 7, end of line number 7 basically, and magically our code has, I'll just use some different color, has now evaluated to a value of 6. So magically our code has now evaluated to a value of 6, right? Because we returned the result as 6 back to the main execution context. Now let's go and execute. Let's go and see what the next line is. I know it's a repetitive mundane thing, but yes, again let's go and execute this next line. So next line we encounter, and this thing I'll just draw it completely. This result over here is then stored in our output, right? Let's encounter line number 8. We declare a new identifier. We see a new identifier over here, that is new output. So we'll be declaring a variable named new output. Again, yet it's not yet assigned again because it's a function execution. Again, it's the same function execution multiplied by 2. So what happens? We'll have new output which is equal to multiply by 2, and we are passing in the value 10. So again, we are entering a new function. That means we are creating a new execution context. An execution context is a combination of thread of execution and memory, right? We are going to do the same thing. The input parameter over here is input number over here, input number is 10, and we are going to encounter another identifier result which will be evaluated to 10 into 2, that is 20, and then we have return result. Now let's dive deep into return result part. Just this little statement, return result. Return is a keyword of JavaScript. So JavaScript will know that, okay, I need to go out and go back to the main thread of execution, or go back to the upper level of thread of execution where this function was invoked. But when it encounters result, what JavaScript thinks is return result. Result is I need to return the value of an identifier that is in my memory block. Now which memory block? It will not go and identify, it will not go and look for result in this memory block. It will go and look for the result in this memory block. So it will be 20, and hence it is known as local memory or local execution context, right? So the output of this would be 20, and this would be stored in our new output, which will be 20. So that is basically our thread of execution and function in JavaScript. That's pretty much it. A lot of jargons have been thrown around, and I hope you have enjoyed this thing. And if you have any questions, do post it in the comment section, or I'll just go and look in the chat section and try to answer them. And just continue to the next part if you like this thing, and we'll be posting many more videos in this series. So do like, subscribe, and share Everyday JavaScript, and please do drop in your feedback on this. Thank you.